This is chapter 40, entitled Musical Diaries, Hensel and Programmatic Piano Music. So this is, of course, one of those pieces, like most pieces, that can be in more than one genre, because we are going through our genre of a category I call piano music, hyphen solo and with orchestra. This is solo piano music we're going to sample. But it also is programmatic music, so you could say, well, it should be in the other section, but it's okay where it is. So let's go to the PowerPoint. This chapter, first, we're going to discuss the disadvantages that women have had in the 19th century, and then talk about Fanny Hensel and her brother a little bit, Felix, which we already listened to in programmatic music for his Midsummer Night's Dream concert overture, and incidental music that he had written for the wedding music that we listened to. But then we'll sample some music for Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel. But the point here is, while women in the 19th century, and I might just go back, that I really admire the Greeks and the Romans and think that that's where their roots are. But the more I've been reading about the Greeks, they had a really bad attitude about women. And of course, it was part of the Roman Empire as well. And maybe Christianity was one of the things that tried to, well, just by its nature, corrected that to some extent. And then during the Middle Ages, we continued with this bad attitude towards women. But chivalry and from knights made a big attempt to correct the attitude toward women. And then I think they've been struggling ever since. So while women in the 19th century were discouraged from composing by social convention, they played an essential role as patrons, right? They supported musicians, sponsors, old concerts, whatever, and teachers, of course. Women have always been respected as teachers, as well as coordinating musical activity in the home. Turned out to be a responsibility in this society. So Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel, sister of Felix Mendelssohn and an important sponsor of his music, who also was a talented pianist and composer, known today for her lieder and piano music, including the autobiographical cycle, what that word means, small pieces assembled into a large piece of music by some connection between the two, and the piece is called The Year. It's for the piano, and it's the year, the 12 months, and there's a piece of music for each month, and then a postlude piece, 13 pieces actually. So in the 19th century, expectations for what women was acceptable. There were women that performed in operas and in show business, and unfortunately, I think that as soon as they committed to that, they were considered to be a type of woman that you didn't want your brother to marry. Sad to say. So composition, right, was like, well, that's not accepted for women to be compositionists. And public performance is like, again, is that acceptable? But for women to have money and to support somebody and recognize good art and to pay for it was okay. And then teachers, of course. So few women were successful as composers, but Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel was, and also Clara Wieck Schumann. Remember, married to Robert Schumann and friends of Johannes Brahms. But they didn't get the recognition that they deserved, and perhaps they're getting better recognition to it. Their compositional accomplishments, and resided over musical salons, right? This chamber music attitude from the period of time. So again, Fanny Mendelssohn, that was her maiden name, and Hensel was her married name. And then this lady called named Bettina von Arnim. She really took it upon herself to be friends with a lot of musicians, including Beethoven and Robert Schumann and Brahms and Goethe, the poet, and promoted all of these individuals as much as she had capability of doing. But she was a writer. And anyway, I kind of a woman's librist, right? Here we have a painting, and remember we watched the previous chapter about, there was a video I showed you on piano, and it talked about the women's role in the home in America. And of course, this is the same thing here. German artist portrays a typical family music making scene. So it was okay. In matter of fact, it wasn't okay. It was expected for a wealthy or middle class family to have a piano, which is an expensive investment. And then who was going to play this? Well, the woman. And we have to remind ourselves that at this time in the 19th century in Europe and in America, a man in a middle class job could earn enough to have a nice house, a piano, a family, right? And a wife that didn't have to work. Wow. One earner, right? One income earner. But nowadays, that's not the case. We struggle with two people and can't afford a piano. So the woman played the piano, she taught her kids music, and it provided entertainment. Of course, here's exactly that, right? Another picture, a painting. It's called A Sonata of Beethoven. The artist from 1848 to 1918, so in the late Romantic period. Remember the Romantic period, 1820 to 1900. Another illustration, Jane Austen, you know this writer who wrote a number of books about society in the fiction books about society in the Romantic period, and her book called Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice is a very famous book, and it has characters in there that exactly are what we're talking about, with women that were expected to play the piano and sing. And so if you are interested in finding out about that, read these books. And there are about 3 or 4 movies of Pride and Prejudice, different versions of interpretations of the book. So remember a piano miniature. One of the things about the Romantic period was miniatures, right? Little whiffs of emotion condensed into one piece of music. And then they assembled these little whiffs into larger pieces and called it a cycle. A collection of smaller pieces, we call it a cycle because they're compared together, related to each other. So 1805 to 1847, she was only 42 years old when she died. And so my question is like, well, what happened? Why did she die when she was only 42? Well, she had a stroke. And say, had a stroke? Why would she have a stroke? And guess what? Her brother died 6 months later of a stroke. Both of her parents died of a stroke, and her one grandfather died of a stroke. So I don't know what was going on, but there was apparently a medical weakness in their genes. So in Berlin, Germany, and her family was fairly wealthy, and her parents were Jewish. And even at this time, there was a movement of anti-Semitism, and her parents had experienced this anti-Semitism and didn't want their children to be subject to this. So they decided to raise their children as Christians, Felix and Fanny, the sister and brother. And guess what? It didn't matter. They were still treated as Jews. which was not nice right at the time. The mother was evidently pretty successful, accomplished with music education, and she helped Felix and Fanny and taught them music. So when it was time, and I think that she started seeing this man, Wilhelm Hensel, when she was like 16 years old. I don't know how old was she when she married him, but so it was not acceptable for her to compose, although she was a wonderful composer, and we're finding out now how wonderful composer she was. She wrote a lot of chamber music, over 125 piano works. That's a lot of music. She wrote vocal music, 250 songs, Lieder. And they're really beautiful things. You should check it out on YouTube, Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel. Really nice stuff. And it's curious because her brother was more conservative in his music style, and Fanny was more adventurous. And it's kind of like that her brother Felix, you know, you write a piece of music and you say, I hope this person likes it. I hope these people like it. I hope it's successful. So you really, even though you may not think you are writing a piece of music with trying to make people happy. And maybe because Fanny knew that her music wasn't going to be published and it probably wasn't even going to be heard, she didn't care. She just wrote from her heart. So her music is, I think, much more adventurous than, and it's been said by critics, it's much more adventurous than Felix's music. I always love these kind of pictures. It shows her workroom. Right? It's not a bedroom. And of course, she has her piano and nice artwork on the walls. Apparently, this is the candelabra. You'd have a candle in there, right? And have to light it. And plenty of light from windows, a hardwood floor. So it must have been quite loud in here to have the piano in this hardwood floor. No, just this little rug here. And a writing table, work to compose music, perhaps, or write letters. And notice how this is elevated here for some reason. And a chair. And I don't know, a little desk, end table kind of thing. Plants. And a sitting chair. It says 1849. 1849. So she was born 1805, and so she died in 1847. Well, apparently it was taken after she died. Written, painted. So we're going to sample a piece of music that she wrote, and it's part of a piano cycle. Again, it's called The Year, Das Jahr. And actually, the manuscript was discovered in 1989. The manuscript meaning it's not what was published by a machine and printers, but what she wrote in her hand. And apparently, there are the music was in different colors, different colored papers, and with paintings on it by her husband. And so autobiographical, suggests passage of time, seasons of one's life. And we're going to sample the movement 9, right? September, at the river. And it includes a drawing of a barefooted woman by a stream. And so each one of these movements, each one of these character pieces has an epigram, a poetic epigram. Echo, what's an epigram?
An epigram is a brief, interesting, memorable, and sometimes surprising or satirical statement. The word is derived from the Greek pi gamma rho alpha mu alpha epigramma restriction from pi iota gamma rho phi epsilon iota mu epigraphane to write on, to inscribe, and the literary device has been employed for over 2 millennia.
Okay, there you have it. So here's the epigram, right? Lines from Goethe, the poet. Flow, flow, dear river, never will I be happy. So that's the epigram. Here is a picture, a painting of Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel. So the piece of music has a lot of places for rubato, and this is one of those things. Rubato, it doesn't say rubato. It's up to the performer to choose where rubato would be appropriate. And so it's about the river, so it has this swelling and decrescendo and crescendos. This performance is from a contest, and I think this piano was a piano that that she may have, not that she personally played on, but the kind of piano that she would have played on at the time. And so there's a little introduction by a judge because it's from a contest. But here is a performance of September at the River, written by Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel. September at the River. I want to play a little bit of another piece called Nocturno, right, in G minor, also by Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel. You should also check out a string quartet that she wrote. Maybe she wrote one more than one, but I was looking at it on YouTube. It's a lovely piece of music, and it's certainly example of romantic music with extreme emotionalism and uh, and programmatic, right? Because this is a very popular element of romantic music. So that will conclude chapter 40 on an example of a character piece, programmatic piece, actually, by Fanny Mendelssohn Henson. One thing I want to say again, that initially when I saw that they put these chapters in by her, I said, they're just trying to, do right for women and show that they did good things. And I think that's missing the point, because her brother Felix and their family, and again, the society at the time prevented or discouraged women from being composers and seeking recognition in the public. And you can imagine supposedly Felix and Fanny had a wonderful relationship and loved each other like brother and sister and supported each other. And she was always promoting her brother's music. And even some of her music that was published was published under his name. And you can see what Felix might be saying, I want you to succeed too, but, and then taking advantage of the situation. And now I think that we are recognizing that she really was a good composer, whether she was a woman or not. And so it's worth paying attention to her contribution as a composer. End of story.